But yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Dave Webb, now the Network Technical Head for Track. As Rich said, I started back in the 90s, 1992. Started as what was a trackman then, track operative now, at Sutton Coalfield, here in the West Midlands. It was when they were just electrifying the line, so they were having a bit of a recruitment drive just before the end of British Rail, actually. And then moved through privatisation, worked for GTRM. I worked at Walsall, where I carried on for about 5 years as a track person, and then decided I best go back to university. I wasn't really enjoying it on the shovel and falling asleep on a spanner, so I thought it'd be best if I go and did that. But just as I was going to go back to university, I was offered a lifeline and was asked if I'd like to be a technical officer. That was in '97. I took up a technical officer's job at Walsall, where the training school is now. It was our depot then. And I had a fantastic time doing that job. I loved being a technical officer. And that really cemented me wanting to stay on the railway. Early 2000s, moved to Saltley Depot, as a few people know from them days, knocking around in here, where I was the ATME, I was also the RME, and I was the TME. And then in the early 2012, I moved to become the route asset manager track for what was L&W. L&W South at first, and then took on the whole of the route before becoming the regional engineer. And then, yeah, so I did take a little career break. I was pretty tired and worn out after doing that job for a while. But then John offered me a lifeline to come back, and how could I resist that? After years of complaining about bits of the standards and what was wrong with them, I thought it's about time I took a job on where I can actually influence it and change them. So that's what I'm here to do. But it's a real honour for me to stand here and be the Network Technical Head after 32 years. I can't believe I come from being on the tools to being here, so it is a real privilege for me, and one I'm looking forward to and relish taking on the challenge. So today I'm going to talk about what I see as my priorities for me and my team for us to take forward track in the next control period, over the next 5 to 10 years really. There's a few things I'd like to achieve before the end of my career. I'm certainly not ready to retire, although I tried to retire. I'm certainly not ready to retire, actually, so I've got some things I want to do. And we've touched on some of them this morning, especially the way we're going to do inspection in the future, and just the incredible pace of change with artificial intelligence and what that's going to bring to us. So I'm going to talk about my sort of top 5 priorities and why I think they're important to me, and what we're going to do with the standards and the competency frameworks to help everybody going forward. So the first one for me is about the integrity of inspections. So when I first came, the first thing I saw and got involved with when I came back last October was looking at the output from the incident we had at Colton Junction last year. Really did scare me because I could see how easily it was that we could deteriorate, the track could deteriorate and get to that state. And how difficult it was for people to manage that with all the complexities we've put in place. And what I mean by that is we've now got basic visual inspection, PLPR, RBM regimes. We've got 2 types of RBM regimes, 10662 standard, 7014 standard. And at the same time, we're trying to bring in things like artificial intelligence using AVA and One Big Circle. So we're really in a place where we're in a hybrid place now. And some of the questions this morning was about that. Well, what's the governance look like for AI? How are we going to use the 153? So for me, it's time that we grasped the nettle really and took a change in the standard and rewrite it to make sure that we can innovate and move away from what we've been doing for nearly 200 odd years, which is walking along the track with either a spanner or a hammer. And it was actually a bit like that when I started the railway, believe it or not. So what I'm looking to do is move away from basic visual inspection. It really is the thing of the past. We'll still have places we've got to do it for in the short term, short to medium term, but in the long term we need to move away from the basic visual inspection and supervision inspection as we know it today. And the vision systems that we're starting to see now on the 153, the UTU, and as someone mentioned earlier, thinking about how we put it on the other trains, that combined with the computing power and AI will come up with, take that data and turn it into the information we need And I think Mark showed some fantastic photos earlier of how that one big circle and what we're doing with AI is actually pinpointing where wet beds are, where there are IBJs. Even factory-built welds, it's identifying you wouldn't see with the eye. It's amazing. So that is the future for me. So I really want, in 001, Mod 2, when we talk about track inspection, it needs to be about using vision systems and modern technology. And we want basic visual inspection really to be the alternative, not the go-to. In 001 Mod 2, it still says near right, pretty much to the top, in red, walking the 4 foot, basically in daylight. Well, we just can't do that now, can we? So we need to develop that technology, and we need to develop it for CWR, modern and legacy to CWR, jointed track, and the various types of S&C. But what I also want to bring in there is what we've done with RBM, because there's been some fantastic work done and delivered around the country. Some of the pioneers, Wales, Route, Western, Alan W. North, and now Eastern really getting into it. That's really borne out some fantastic analysis that we need to adapt and bring into the standards now, because it showed us that we can do things differently. We can inspect at different frequencies because we've learnt more about the asset. And also, some of the time scales that we need to use to repair the defects, we need to change those. So some real opportunities for me to bring those into the standard as well. And that's something I want to do. The next area I want to focus on is track geometry. So, well, I touched on it actually, the fact that we're still running around the TRU, sort of 1980s Class 150, and we've still got bits of units and equipment that are actually from when we started back in 1977. We need to modernise what we do with track geometry. And we need it to be so that you guys and girls as the end users aren't bothered about what trains ran, how it ran. All you're bothered about is you've got the right information, it's on time, it's the right quality. So to do that, we need to be able to update the standards so we can start to use unattended geometry systems. Unattended geometry systems on some of the fleet that we've already got out there, like the Western Fleet and the fleet on Eastern region. But also UGMS systems that we've got on the MPV and the 153. At the moment, we can't use those for compliance reasons because we haven't changed the standards to reflect that. Well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on that so we can start using that data and get it into Insight in the right time, in the right way so that you can use it. Dip angles. So the standards in the standards around dip angles are not very clear. And this was something that actually I picked up when we looked at Colton. So a long time ago in L&W, I introduced a tighter threshold for dip angles on the highest line speed track. And that really had a big impact on the way we managed our geometry, and also had an impact on the number of broken rails we had. So we've got a real opportunity to take some of that learning and think about how we do dip angles. But we need to make sure we understand that it's dip angles in all track, not just plain line and S&C. The way the standard's written today, it's very much about joints, and that's because that's how we introduced them in the first place. So I want to do some work around that. Cyclic top. So we get caught out a lot around with cyclic top speeds. Lots of analysis has been done in the past by Huddersfield and other universities into cyclic top. And it's time for us to look at that, re-look at that, and look at how we can use the new technology and what we're getting from Insight and what we're getting from some of the data we get off the unattended geometry systems to actually give us a true level 1 now for cyclic top. So we can actually predict things before they become a problem where we need to put a speed on. So that's something else that we're going to be looking at. Climate change, big issue for us all. I mean, Rob talked about it this morning, didn't he, when he talked about the fact that we just had the wettest winter for 150 years, amazing. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have hot weather. And, you know, these kind of days out there are our favourite, aren't they, when it's dull, bit overcast, bit drizzly. That's a track engineer's favourite day, but we will get the hot days. And we're going to have to manage even more dramatic hot days, as we've seen in recent years. So for me, we need to become much more risk-based about how we manage our CRT register. At the moment, it relies on you guys and girls going out, finding the sites and putting them on the register. Again, now that we've got new systems coming online and new technology, we need to change it around so we can be truly risk-based. And actually, the register's self-populated by all the data that we get in. So you've got the information about your risk sites so you can make those decisions. And we're looking to create an insight tool for management of CRT. Rich is doing a lot of great work around how we manage buckles and understanding it, how we can replace the need to send watch persons out, and also ultimately looking at how we can bring in non-destructive testing for stress condition. Something that's been a panacea for many years, but we will get there, and there is technology out there we're looking at. So that's something that me and the team have been working on in the next few years, so that we can actually give you a much better indication of where your risk sites are so you can manage them easier. Rail management. So Rob touched on it earlier, the fantastic work we've achieved here in the UK around the rail, how we manage rail. When you think back to Hatfield, we were having 1,000 rail breaks a year, and now we're talking at 100, just less than 100 rail breaks a year. It's unprecedented. So it's world leading, and it's a real testament to the hard work everybody's done to get us to where we are today. We've now got to manage that situation, and we've got to manage it knowing that the asset is going to get older. We've still got legacy assets such as pre-76, 77, 78, 79 rail, as now we're measuring it. And we need to understand those risks and manage them. AI being able to identify pre-76 rail, fantastic, because at the moment it relies on us knowing where it is and trying to look for it, which just is needle and haystack stuff. So we need to look at that. We also need to move away from having to send people out to do suspect testing. And introducing vision software into how we do UTU will allow us to think about doing that. So we actually identify defects on day one. You've got a photo of it, you've got the size of the defect, and then we can send the right people to go and do the repair without needing to go out and verify that suspect. Game changer if we can get that right. So I'm going to be looking at the standards to also look at the timescales for rail defects. We've done some analysis recently on the last 5 years worth of rail defects. So the ARS team and the IM program team got some data scientists in for us and provided us with the data for the first time, so we could see actually how many defects we've actually had over 5 years and sort of deterioration rates and the impact of when we haven't inspected it properly. So when the UTU has run or hasn't run, are we seeing deterioration rates increase or not? And that allowed us to do some things around extending the timescales for 1A and 1 track, but also helped us do the analysis we've done recently on where and when we should fit clamps, which is allowing us to change the rail so we don't have to go out and fit those. So that's huge work. We're going to carry on doing that work now to look at things like where we apply TSRs. Can we do that differently? If we know the size and the scale of a defect and we know exactly where it is and we can monitor it, then can we do something differently rather than running out and putting a speed on? Can we measure it in a different way? But also what I want to be able to do is empower you in the DU as a TME to manage your rail defects. I know, and I've been there on both sides of the fence, putting in endless TVs for rail defects, but also on the other side of the fence on a Friday afternoon trying to sign them all off as a RAM. It's a massive bureaucracy and a massive paperwork exercise, but it's not really allowing people to manage their risks and understand their risks locally. What I want to do is empower the TMEs to be able to make that decision by giving some better guidelines in the standard about when we can extend the time and allowing the TMEs to do that locally. Because if you're a competent engineer, why shouldn't you make that decision? I've noticed on the stands outside that there's some demonstrations of some of the new technology that's coming in for rail defect repair. We tried to introduce it's probably nearly 20 years ago now, Level tell me if I'm right, but 20 years ago we tried to introduce the BV1000, which should have revolutionised how we did our crossing welding repair. It hasn't really worked, has it? And the kit, it's either sitting rusting somewhere or it doesn't exist anymore now. So we need to have the next generation of automated ways of doing our welding repairs. And we've got to do that on the basis of thinking about the safety of our people doing it. Because we know now that welding fume, especially from arc welding, is not good and is dangerous for people. So we've got to make sure we've got the right kit and we've got better ways of working with it, with the data we're getting from things like Felix. So if Felix can provide the information on the profile of a switch and a crossing, then we need something that can automatically take that information and turn it into a quality weld and grind. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as a team. Also, I want to be able to bring rail management into insights so that, again, we've got a decision support tool to help people, especially with things like wear of rail. I've been caught out many times with zero gauge face and side wear that's suddenly crept up on us, because it's really hard in some instances to manage that and monitor it. What we need is a predictive tool that tells us. And the last thing for me is something that, personally, I've always found a bit of a weird science, and that's structure gauging. I could never get my head around it very really. As a TME and ATME, I really just struggle with it. It's not something that I'm particularly au fait at, but luckily I've got Mark Ward in my team who's our expert on it. What's come to light for me is, and when I came to do this job, what I thought about in the first instance is just how much time and effort we now spend with our tech staff going out doing structure gauging. Never used to do that years ago, but we just spend so much time. And those tech staff could be doing so much more for us. Designs, stressing, the work we need to be doing, not going out measuring if a structure's moved or not, or the track's moved towards the structure, I should say. And we need to modernise the way we do that. We are at a time where we can do that now. I'll get my slides to move forward. Yeah. So we are now at that critical point in time, because we now have point cloud data that allows us to capture the whole of the asset, fence line to fence line actually, and start to analyse that, and systems that allowed us to analyse that data and make the decisions about the position of the track in relation to structures, so that we can actually modernise it and move away from people having to analyse that and go out and do manual inspections. There's also something called probabilistic gauging, and what that allows you to do is actually understand the risk of things being struck in much more detail, and allow us to have a much more risk-based approach to where we need to focus our efforts and where we do need to go and spend some time sorting the track out. So that's something that we're looking to roll out. But what I really want to get to is where we've got software that takes point cloud data and actually turns it into information and says, here's the locations that are a problem. We're not far off that, and the next few years is when we're going to spend our time focused on that. So it was a bit brief summary really, but thanks for listening. That for me is where I'm going to be focusing my team's time and effort over the next few years. I hope you can see that we're trying to focus on the things that give us the most pain. For me, if you can manage your inspections, your jack geometry faults, your hot weather, your gauging and your rail defects, you've pretty much got the job covered. So that's why I'm focusing on those things. Thanks for listening.